In 1985, audiences across the world flocked to theaters for a movie that would redefine the action genre, cement Sylvester Stallone as one of the most recognizable faces of the decade, and turn the name Rambo into a symbol that went far beyond cinema. Rambo: First Blood Part 2 wasn't just a sequel, it was a transformation. The first film, First Blood, had introduced John Rambo as a broken man, a soldier haunted by the memories of Vietnam, pushed to violence by a world that had turned its back on him. That film ended with sorrow, a confession of trauma, and a surrender. But in the sequel, Rambo would no longer be a hunted drifter. He would become a warrior reborn, a one-man army, and an icon of raw, unstoppable force. The movie didn't just tell a story, it created an image. The red bandana, the muscled body glistening with sweat, the bow with explosive arrows, the primal scream in the jungle. These images became a part of pop culture history, but behind them lies a deeper story of how the movie came to life, why it struck such a chord, and how it shaped not just action films, but the way audiences viewed war and heroes. The story begins with John Rambo serving time in a prison camp, breaking rocks under a hot sun, punished for the events of the first film. He is silent, focused, carrying the weight of his past on his shoulders. But soon, his old mentor, Colonel Troutman, arrives with an offer. There is a mission, dangerous and secret, to return to Vietnam and confirm whether American prisoners of war are still being held captive. For Rambo, this is more than a mission. It is a chance to confront the ghosts of his past, to step back into the jungle that never truly left him, and perhaps, in some small way, to find redemption. The government, represented by the slick and untrustworthy Marshal Murdoch, promises that this mission is reconnaissance only. Rambo is to take photographs, nothing more. But deep down, Rambo knows that when men are suffering, orders cannot keep him from action. When Rambo gears up for the mission, audiences saw one of the most iconic sequences of the decade. His body was a sculpture of muscle and discipline, the camera lingering on every strap, every knife, every weapon attached with ritual precision. Stallone trained tirelessly for months to achieve this look, knowing that the image of Rambo needed to transcend reality and enter the realm of myth. The parachute drop into Vietnam goes wrong from the start, his gear tangled and ripped away, leaving him with little but his own instincts. But Rambo is at home in the jungle. He moves silently, blending with mud and shadows, a predator returned to his domain. Guided by a local contact, Co Bao, he infiltrates a prison camp at night and finds what Murdoch and the government never truly wanted him to find: American soldiers, skeletal and broken, chained and forgotten. In their faces, Rambo sees himself, abandoned by the very nation they fought for, and in that moment, orders mean nothing. He chooses to act. What follows is a storm of violence, suspense, and betrayal. Rambo rescues one prisoner and makes a desperate run for extraction. Co Bao proves her bravery, fighting alongside him as they race through rain and fire. But when Rambo radios for the helicopter, the unthinkable happens. Murdoch, fearful of political fallout, orders the pilot to abandon Rambo. The chopper turns away, leaving him stranded, betrayed not by his enemies, but by his own country. Captured, beaten, and tortured, Rambo endures electric shocks and humiliation, but his silence is stronger than their chains. He refuses to break. And when the moment comes, he explodes with fury, slaughtering his captors, torching camps, and tearing through soldiers with a mixture of survival skills and raw rage. The bow with explosive arrows, the mud camouflage ambush, the roaring machine gun, these became cinematic legend. Amid the chaos, Rambo's bond with Co Bao deepens. In a rare, quiet moment, she dreams of escaping the cycle of war, of finding freedom. It is a flicker of hope in Rambo's world of violence. But hope doesn't last long. She is shot and killed, dying in his arms, and with her last breath she asks him to live for both of them. Her death reignites his fury. The rest of the film is Rambo unleashed, a whirlwind of vengeance and rescue. He frees the prisoners, destroys enemy forces, and takes the war into his own hands. By the end, the jungle burns, helicopters fall, and Rambo stands alone, bloodied but unbroken. When he confronts Murdoch back at base, he doesn't kill him. Instead, he delivers words that cut deeper. He doesn't want pity or medals, only the same love for America's soldiers that they gave to their country. It is both a demand and a plea, a soldier's cry for respect. And then, as always, he walks away, unable to belong to a world that betrayed him, but unwilling to stop fighting for the men who were forgotten. While the story itself became legendary, the making of the film is equally fascinating. The original draft of the script was written by James Cameron, who envisioned a darker, more political story with Rambo teamed up alongside another soldier. But Stallone felt that Rambo needed to stand alone. He rewrote the script, shaping it into something larger than life, more heroic and more mythic. Where Cameron leaned into realism, Stallone leaned into spectacle. The result was a movie that felt like a fantasy of rewriting history, a wish fulfillment for a nation still wrestling with the wounds of Vietnam. Rambo would go back, fight harder, and win the war America had lost. The production took place largely in Mexico, standing in for Vietnam. The conditions were brutal, humid heat, swarms of insects, and dangerous terrain. Stallone, determined to make the action authentic, performed many of his own stunts. Explosions were real. Massive fireballs detonated in the jungle. Helicopters flew perilously close to the ground, and Stallone put his body on the line again and again. He injured himself during filming, but pushed through, unwilling to let anything slow production. His dedication was part of what made the movie feel so visceral. Julian Nixon, playing Bao, brought both toughness and vulnerability to her role, and Richard Crenna returned as Troutman, grounding the film with the weight of authority and compassion. Charles Napier, as Murdoch, provided the kind of villain audiences loved to hate, a cowardly bureaucrat rather than a soldier, representing betrayal with a smirk instead of a weapon. The politics of the film stirred controversy. The Vietnam War was still a raw subject in the mid-'80s, and the idea of American prisoners of war being left behind was hotly debated. The film tapped into that national wound, presenting a story where a single soldier could do what the government refused to do. For some, it was cathartic and inspiring. For others, it was simplistic and nationalistic fantasy. Critics were divided, many dismissing the movie as cartoonish, overblown, or propaganda. Roger Ebert acknowledged the excitement of the action, but criticized the thin story. Other critics rolled their eyes at the excess, but audiences had the final word. The film exploded at the box office, grossing over $300 million worldwide on a budget of about $25 million. In the US alone, it raked in more than $150 million, making it one of the highest-grossing films of 1985, second only to blockbusters like Back to the Future. The imagery of Rambo First Blood Part 2 burned into the culture. The red bandana tied tight, the sweat-drenched muscles, the explosive arrows, it all became shorthand for power and defiance. Action figures filled toy aisles, kids tied cloths around their heads imitating Rambo, and parodies appeared in cartoons and comedies. The name Rambo itself entered the dictionary, used to describe anyone who solved problems with brute force. Politicians referenced him in speeches, and news headlines used the term as metaphor. Rarely does a film character escape the screen to become a cultural icon, but Rambo did. The legacy of the film is built not on critical praise, but on audience passion. Even today, critics on Rotten Tomatoes rate it around 33%, while audience scores soar much higher. On IMDb, it holds around 6.5, modest but steady. But numbers don't capture the emotional resonance. For a generation of fans, this was the movie that defined what action meant. On VHS, it became a staple of home collections, played endlessly on cable television, and introduced to younger audiences who weren't even alive during Vietnam. Its influence spread into video games, comics, and even animated shows. Stallone himself acknowledged that the success of this film transformed his career. Rocky had given him one iconic character, but Rambo gave him another, ensuring that his name would forever be linked to two of the most enduring franchises in film history.